Welcome to the Feisworld podcast, engaging conversations that cross the boundaries between business, art, and the digital world.
Hello, my friends. It's been a month since I released the first episode of my podcast. This is going to be episode number 8. I've hit a 500 download milestone a few days ago. Pretty psyched about that. Well, the most exciting part of today is introducing my next guest, Matt Lindley, to you all. I suspect that most of you who are listening to this episode is because you know him, possibly have worked with him at some point. But for those of you who don't know Matt, he is the Director of Innovation for SapientNitro. We became friends instantly when he first started working there in 2009. Matt had such an impact on my life. If you were to ask me, list 3 people who helped shape you into who you are today, Matt would be one of them. Matt's list of accomplishments in the advertising and marketing world goes way, way back. He's been a storyteller for over 25 years. He sold OneZero Media, where he created and produced CBS's first broadcast TV show about the internet. And he personally hosted that for 3 seasons. He was an ECD, EVP, by the way, that means Executive Creative Director, as well as Executive Vice President at Arnold Worldwide, leading Progressive. And most recently, he co-created a business visioning tool called ThirtySix at SapientNitro. He's a board member for Friends of the Boston Homeless, a nonprofit organization that helps over 400 homeless individuals move beyond shelter to lead independent lives in our community. Matt's also a board member for Stop Handgun Violence. Those of you who have driven by Mass Turnpike since 2008, you probably have noticed the 250-foot billboard that says, "We sell guns, no ID required, no background checks." In this 2-part episode, I recorded with Matt Lindley at his home office. You'll hear about Matt's path from growing up on a farm in Pennsylvania to his appointment as a senior advertising executive. Matt shares his strategy for making sure that your creative input is valuable. We also touch upon parenthood and what it means to do the best you can do as a father and as a colleague. I hope you all enjoy the show, and remember that you do not have to scribble furiously. Show notes, tools, and resources can be found on my website at feisworld.com. That is FEISWORLD for this episode as well as all the previously released ones. You can also listen to my podcast directly on feisworld.com or subscribe via iTunes and non-iTunes channels. Enjoy. First movie, what year was that? What was it about?
It was 1984. Were you born in 1984?
Yes, I was 1 year old.
Okay, it was a Super 8 movie about flying.
Yeah?
Yeah.
God, this is fantastic.
Yeah, it's funny that you're in here, that this is an interesting, because it's all in here. It's not generally a place folks sit, but yeah, all the stuff's in here.
Wow. This is great. I feel like if we just go around your office,
yes,
we can probably talk and
about all that. Yeah, the Eddie Hotel, Eddie Guitar. It says "Happy 40th. Play till your balls bleed." Eddie Van Halen. It's not really Eddie Van Halen. It's a joke.
It was a joke.
There's nobody. He wouldn't write balls bleed. I don't think. Anyway, yeah, it's bad.
So what about that movie from '84? What was in it exactly?
Are we going? Are we live here?
Yeah.
So the movie was called Soaring, and what happened was I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania, and right behind the farm was an airport, and the airport was a little grass strip, and every day as a kid I would watch these sailplanes, and sailplanes are just planes with no motors. And so I'd watch them, and I could hear them. They'd come over the house, and when it was really, really quiet, you just hear this, they'd fly over the house. Mm-hmm. So when I went to George School, which is where I went to high school, they have a senior project. So you get like 3 weeks to go do something. So I decided to make a Super 8 movie about flying. Uh-huh. So a buddy of mine we got a tape recorder, put it between my feet. We got a Super 8 camera, a Bolex, and we went up in sailplanes for 2 weekends. And and then we used the Steve Winwood soundtrack, and we put it all together, and we showed it. And it was just, the music was synced by somebody putting the needle on a record. I mean, it was really old school.
How long? How many minutes?
It was probably 3 minutes, and it was, and I showed it at an assembly my senior year, and I went back for a reunion for a 20-year, 15-year reunion, one of those, and somebody said, "Hey, whatever happened to that movie?" So my plan was to put it on a DVD, and then the guy I was talking to said, "Yeah, I wouldn't send your old Super 8 movie," and I was like, "Well, I don't want to lose it, so I'm still waiting to transfer it all, make it all digital."
Really?
Yeah.
When is that going to happen?
I don't know. Sometime soon, I hope. But it was a fun movie, and it was punctuated. The end of it was 2 loops in the sailplane, which are really scary because you have no motor, so you're going straight down like 90 knots, and then you pull the stick back, and the thing goes inverted. And you can hear my voice on there. I was screaming like I was an 11-year-old, during that. And that was and that was it. So I really enjoyed it, but I never wanted to be a pilot, and I don't think I ever went soaring again after that flight. That was it.
84.
84.
Were you already working in advertising, or?
Well, I wanted to make movies. My dad, who was a painter, also had a film company called So-So Films, and he had a Moviola, which is this giant film, 16-millimeter film thing. And I didn't know what it did, but I thought it was cool. So I'd see him in there looking at films. And so he got me a little Super 8 one, which had a little hand crank right and left. And when you cut Super 8 film, you actually slice it, and then you scrape the emulsion, and then you glue it. And you count to 20, and you pop it out. So I learned how to do that. And that's why this movie's probably in 72 old pieces, because and probably yellow. But so yeah, that was the beginning of wanting to make TV. The funny part was we didn't have TV. There was no TV in the house. There was no. We didn't have no TV in the house. No nothing. My parents were completely opposed to it. And as an adult, I have a 9-foot screen in the basement. I used to be on TV, and I make TV commercials.
I heard you have a movie theater in the basement.
Yes. Well, the movie theater we were going to watch movies. It was going to be purely for movies, and then somehow a cable box wound up there, and I'm sure they're watching the Kardashians in the basement now. I'm really sorry about it.
Well, thank you so much for having me in your beautiful house. There's so much to
love.
Thank you. And one of my favorite rooms is on the first floor, overseeing the backyard, and there was all green. I could just imagine like it's a perfect spot for meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you meditate?
Oh God, that would be. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Somewhere between the screaming about last night's homework not being done and the dog being 110 and peeing on the carpet, I really don't have time to meditate. So I wish. I tried meditation. I never really got its consistency is the thing about meditation. Once or twice is not enough. So the idea of sitting out there and being really quiet. Yeah. I will tell you, my father at age 80 got very ill and came to live with us, and we built a wall, and that was his room. And that was where he passed away.
Oh wow.
Was right in there, just the way he wanted. He asked for a piece of art from his house in North Carolina to be put over the mantelpiece. We did, and he was there with us for 3 months. That was his room. So he looked out the window every day. And then till the day he passed away, and I was sitting there, and I looked at him, and I think, and I said, this is the first thing I said after my father died. I said, I think that's your ball game right there.
Wow.
And he was just so super peaceful, really nice, and then that was it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place. And when I walked in there, I just sensed something very different. Yeah. Where my mom came from, we tend to be a little bit superstitious, I guess. Yeah. I do admit it, but I definitely sense a lot. And then you just shared your dad's sketches with me, and I just felt very different. It's so funny that I grew up in an artistic family. Yep. I cannot stand like print work, and I understand sometimes people have to do that, and due to budget reasons and all that. But when you actually flip through the pages of something someone actually painted and put in so much thoughts, and I saw a lot of life drawings, people on the couch and dogs running around and all these things. It's kind of his expression towards like the life he was living in. So. Yeah, he was an extraordinarily passionate human being about art. Mm-hmm. In some of the sketches you saw, he was. What would happen is I would come home from school. I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania, and it would be a random Wednesday, and I would bring my friend. I remember his name was Gary Anderson, and I brought him home
from school, and we walked home from the bus, and it really was a mile on a dirt road. I mean, honestly, it really was. We walked home, and I got home, and on the dining room table was a woman. She was probably about 270 pounds. There was a sheet on the table. There was this woman who was about 270 pounds. She was naked, and she was surrounded by about 9 men and women, all with sketch pads, and they were all just drawing her arms, her legs, her breasts, whatever. They were just all drawing parts of her. Gary Anderson walked into the house, went over, used the phone, and asked his parents to come pick him up. He said, I don't want to be here. There's a gigantic naked lady on the dining room table. So it was Wednesday sketch class at the house when I was a kid. And,
wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea about all these stories. And
yeah. I'm kind of wondering now. I realize it's the podcast. I've just told everybody that. But it really was a very, very different way to grow up. So that was kind of my my introduction to all this. And that was just sort of normal.
That's great. You know what? My podcast is labeled clean, but there's one option I can adjust per episode to make it explicit.
Yeah.
I love it.
I haven't been explicit yet, have I? Or maybe slightly. But
No, not yet. Yeah. You know, it's so fascinating. I remember when I worked at Sapient, and unfortunately, we didn't really get to work on all the great projects together.
Yeah.
I guess I was 25, 26, and trying to figure
out. Well, you're 50 now. How's
it feel? It's very different. It's like, I remember there was a comedian saying how people change as they age.
Yeah.
Like in your 20s, you hate everybody.
Yeah.
You hate especially your parents. In your 30s, you hate the government and politics. And in your 40s, you're saying, I'm hungry. I can totally eat that pig.
You're right. Yeah.
I think I'm arriving at I can eat that pig like a little bit earlier than 40 at this point. So, and I always realized that your dad had such an impact on you, but not until today, just now, I realized it's even bigger and more significant than I thought.
I think it's both my parents. They're both painters. So the notion that mom had a studio and dad had a studio, they were both home all the time. So when I was growing up, and then they would take their paintings, they put them in a VW bus and drive them into New York to the gallery that they had and sell them. I mean, that's how the whole thing worked for years and years and years. Oh. So dad redid the pig pen, and mom redid what was a saddlery, it turned out, on this farm. And so she would paint and he would paint, and then they come in and smoke cigarettes and smell like turpentine all lunch on the weekends, and then they go back out and paint again.
You had the perfect childhood.
I think I did. There are people who would argue with that because I have a lot of very strange notions about the way things are supposed to work. And now I get into traffic for an hour in the morning, and I go in and I've got 150 emails. It's just a very, very different world for me.
I'm very surprised because perhaps talking to you, I will figure out what my parents never understood about my life, my career.
Yeah.
Because as you know, both of them, one still is very hardcore artist. That's all they've ever known.
Yeah.
And for me, trying to explain advertising, what I do is just like, you just see their heads become expanding unstopped. So.
What is the part where you lose your mom when you're talking to her about something that you're making? What is the part where she looks at you like, what is she look at you and say, why would you do that? Or does she look at you and say, I don't understand? Or does she say, that's really great for you, sweetie. Have a nice day. What does she say?
It's interesting. As a project manager, when I describe to my mom the way I work with designers, user experience designers, she's thinking, okay, that's like the digital side of things, but as a fine artist, I still get it. Mm-hmm. And it sounds pretty fun. Mm-hmm. Anything visual you put in front of her, what she struggles with, for instance, website design, especially banner type of stuff, she's like, that's so many constraints you have to work within.
Yeah.
For one, that's a box, and she can't think along that term. I'm like, Mom, that's like a blown up version of what it actually is. Yeah. In reality, it's 300 by 250 pixels. And my mom loves grand, huge paintings. Yeah. She hated that. What she really struggles with, and anytime I pull up a spreadsheet or like a project plan, she's like, I want to paint. I want to get you out of this. This is horrendous. You know.
Well, I get hives. I mean, I do the same thing. I am not, and I have. This is part of being over 50. Is there was a point where I just had to admit I just don't know what to do with Excel. I really don't know. And honestly, I think people I don't know what to do with all that stuff. And I figure that you can get people to help you do all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And what you have to bring to bear as either an artist or someone who grew up in that environment is like, listen, there are no straight lines in my life. Everything's a curve. I don't, my kids are in school. I'm not a big grade person. I'm not a big fan of homework. Everything's a round edge for me. I think the unique people in the world have round edges. or is it round edge? They're round. They're not square. And so, but the problem is the pursuit. If you want a house at the beach, and it is extraordinarily hard to be whatever the former would be. It's very hard not to, be in the banner box. All the furniture that was downstairs that you saw was initially paid for by, I was at ZDNet making banners years ago. And I was making banners freelance. And they're the smallest, 90. It used to be, banners used to fit wherever they do it editorially. They would make the publication online in 1996. And then they would tell you what the sizes were. There were no standard sizes. So at 6 o'clock at night, you would get your assignment. You get a 90 by 170, a 250 by 450. I mean, it was no standard sizes. And so we're in these little tiny boxes with little tiny cows stretching. It was fun because it was weird. But then years later, it becomes this sort of like constraint. But yeah, I see your mom. I mean, my father, I think, was powerless to do anything else. He had to paint. And he used to go to the studio even if he couldn't paint and sit there with a book and read until noon. He would go at 6 o'clock in the morning and read for 6 hours if he had to, just so he would be there. It took that kind of discipline to get that kind of work done.
I don't know why all artists are very similar. I feel the same way about my parents, and especially my mom. When she was, I don't know what your dad's upbringing was like, possibly very similar. For my mom, she came from a very musical family, and the rest of her sisters became musicians, but she knew she wanted to be an artist. And I think also because her parents are very conservative, very strict, and for her, so she kind of went the other way by expressing herself. One of the examples she told me was when my grandma kind of bought new sheets, and they were very poor back then, and she would try to find a pen, actually trace over all the prints on the sheet. And
wow.
Yeah, that's what she did as like 3.5, 4-year-old.
Yeah.
I think art in itself is meditation for her, and I think it sounds like very much for your dad and your mom as well.
My mom, the meditation has become where she is. I mean, she lives on the farm in Pennsylvania, and I think the actual environment, the landscape, has become what she does. She doesn't actively paint, but what she does is manage the farm, which at 85 or 84 years old is a full-time job for her. So she manages this entire place, and that's become her what she does. Dad painted right up until a week before he died. He did a painting for Addie. Drawing for Addie. But Dad for him, it was always paper to pencil. But yes, same thing. His father was an editor and edited and was a translator. But he lived a pretty strict upbringing. He said he didn't eat with his parents till he was like 9 years old. He used to eat in the kitchen, and his parents would have dinner. I mean,
why was that?
It was sort of a thing. A child of the 40s, 50s. He went away to boarding school. It was one of those get the trunk, put it on the train, send him to Hotchkiss. Got out of Hotchkiss, put the trunk on the train, sent him to Yale, and then he came home. That was it. So it was very much send your kids to these different places. And I think that, and in the meantime, what he did was, he wanted to paint, and painting was it. And then he went to the Art Students League, which is where he met my mom. So they were both there at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah. This
is incredible. I feel so blessed just talking to you. One of the reasons I started the podcast is I feel like I know you. I know you really well.
Yeah.
Even though I've known you since 2009.
Yeah.
I had to look back to your LinkedIn profile to find out exactly when you started at Sapient. I'm like, oh my God, I've reached that age. I felt like 2-3 years ago, and turns out it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I was always eager to ask is what shaped you into who you are? How, what is that mix of things? And I think your parents definitely played, and how you grew up, where you grew up, played a really interesting part.
Well, that's why I think you could say that. I mean, it's like the stories you were telling me about the Forbidden City. I mean, that changes someone's life, right? I'm seeing these things that you see. I grew up on in rural Pennsylvania, 100-acre farm. There was no television. There was, I listened to the radio at night. I mean, it really, really was as low-key as it could possibly be.
And then yet you became a senior executive creative director at one of the most prestigious multiple advertising agencies in Boston.
Well, I think that's because of that. I think the thing was I could see things that other people, I saw the relationship between things that other people didn't see because of the need to simplify, the need to simplify things. I'm in a constant state of needing to simplify things because I really can't put them. There's a perspective that you can see in a spreadsheet, like you said. You're opening up a spreadsheet. I don't know what's happening. And I was in school. I was a horrible student, and I would look at that stuff, and the teachers would look at me and go, "You're so smart. Why can't you figure this out?" I'm like, I'm really not that smart. My brain doesn't work that way. But I can connect these two things together. And so that's what my job has become. And I didn't realize till I was working in Arnold, I think, that it was like, that's what a creative director does. It's like, wait a minute, I saw that when I was a kid, or I saw that 6 months ago, or did you hear that music? If you take that music and you put it together with this, and then when digital came along, it was like, wait a minute, if you take that music and this CMS and that thing, and you put them, and suddenly there was this combination of all these elements that made for these experiences for users and I say users because it used to just be viewers. You jam all that stuff together and like, oh, this is incredibly smart. You're like, no, it's not. It's all there. It's just seeing the connection. And I think that's, in the end, that's become it, is just stepping back. And it's called child's mind, which is you just go to this place in your head where you like act like you're 9. And you look at it and you go, no, you know what? I don't get that. Like, I honestly don't get that. And there's no other place to do that except advertising. Because you're looking at it, it's financial. Well, you're not supposed to get that. That's for big boys. But in advertising, it's a paper towel, You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's someone said the other day, there's 97 different kinds of toothbrushes. Why should I give a shit about this one? And you're like, well, let's talk about it. What's this? And that's seeing those connections and making those with all the stuff that we have now, we can bring to bear, is what makes it interesting.
So as the director of innovation, we'll get into the title because I think it may be just the coolest and the sexiest titles anywhere in the world.
Well, it's also the first person to get fired, but
I just love the conversational setup,
I can tell, it's funny, watching you doing this is like, I think this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
I think maybe you need to be at, that's too cold. You need to be at this is what you need to do, I think.
I love it.
And also, everybody on the radio sounds like you. You ever listen to anybody on the radio, like the accent,
No way.
No one has that, like, everybody on the radio has a voice that has a thing.
Yeah.
You have a thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you knew this. I shouldn't bring up things from 15 years ago, but I was I worked as a DJ at China National Radio Station.
Yeah.
When I was 15, 16.
Yeah.
I was never trained, and they were open-minded enough to say that it's okay for you to be a complete amateur.
Yeah.
So what happened prior to that, if I didn't mention, was my mom over the radio signed me up for a national English competition.
Yeah.
Of course, I grew up speaking Mandarin Chinese, and yes, my parents had a lot of foreign friends, but in the long run, I was speaking English like 2 weeks out of a year, broken English.
Yeah.
By the time I showed up at the competition, my mom's like, "You're gonna win. You would be number one." I'm like, "Mom, everybody else is also an only child, so like, don't, please, just be realistic here." And then I walked around, and I noticed they're all Asian kids.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, we go to school in LA. My family lives in Brookline." And I'm like, "Whoa, what's going on here? We're in Beijing, and this is not fair. Mom, no way I'm going to win." So she's like, "But yes, you will." And I got up there. I just did my thing. My mom was like enthusiastic among the audience. I still remember seeing her face. And at the end of the day, and my mom's like, "You got to do it." So what happened was, in the end, I sang a song.
Yeah.
It's a very touching story. I just picked up the guitar. I felt so awkward, and I looked around. It was like 5,000 people watching the competition, just playing and singing. So I did come in first.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
And the best part of all that is a director of China National Radio approached me and said, "Would you like to host the show?" And he's like, "But, clearly you have never done this before and you're 15. You got to sign all the paper and you need to co-host the show first before we determine you're good enough."
Yeah.
So I did that with some guy, apparently very famous, some 25-year-old.
Yeah.
I remember going to school the next day. People were like, "Can we get his autograph? He's so cute." And then I did the show and live, and that DJ made me sing what I sang during the competition. I felt extremely awkward, and I was thinking, no way I'm doing this, but I'm going to do it. Yeah. And I got my show for about a year.
That's awesome.
I had a ton of fun. Yeah. I produced it in a really professional studio. Yeah. That's one of the trigger points. My mom, to my 31-year-old self, my mom's like, "You can do it. Get back into radio, and you got to have your show." I was like, "Mom, I don't know, man. I'm too old." And
no, you're not. No, not at all. This is an expression that both my father and mother used, which is "Why not you?"
Yeah.
And why not you is really true. Why not you?
That's going to be the first quote. You know what? That's going to be the title of this podcast.
Yeah.
Why not you?
Why not you? Well, that speaks to the notion that 72 careers. I opened a restaurant in Gloucester with a friend of mine. It wound up being 66 cents an hour when we were done because it took so much time to do everything. I've done a bunch of startup companies. One of which was a TV show with a website a company that we sold. Totally absurd idea, but again, why not? Why not you? And I remember calling my parents saying, "Listen, I'm going to quit my job. I had just gotten married. I said I'm going to quit my job. We're going to start this thing." And they were just, thumbs up.
Wow.
And I'm wondering whether or not I'm going to be that guy. I'm wondering whether or not my kids are going to call and go, "Listen, Dad, I'm going to grow hydroponic pot." And I'm like, that's awesome, buddy. I'm so excited for you. I don't know whether that's going to be. I want to be the same guy. I want to be like your mom, looking at you, going, "Listen, you're going to win." Because there's a kid who lives in Brookline, or L.A., and it's an English competition. I mean, that's brutal.
Yeah.
And you won. And so that goes back to that expression, which is why not you? Because there's a lot of people who do what, where you say, that's not necessary. I'm not going to do that. And then you go, you know what? Yeah, I am going to do that. And I have a feeling that's kind of your thing. And I think part of that comes from having a mom who's an artist, which is, you have to put yourself out there. You can't be a half an artist. I mean, you can be. Advertising is half art. Like, you can put yourself out there until it offends your client. But the notion is that you go, as an artist, you got to go all the way to the canvas. You got to go all the way you have to go all the way to the full expression. Otherwise, you're cheating yourself. So then there's no point. So the question is, what do I do to get fully there? So for you, NPR, Sunday afternoons, Feisworld. Feisworld.
You never know. And, to be honest, I had no idea how much traction I could get. I would imagine. So this is what happened a week ago. I finally put my foot down, and after having a minor emotional breakdown, producing this, listening to myself, and thought, that was awful. Nobody wants to listen to this.
Yeah.
I'm not even from here. I could hear my accent. I got nothing good to say. I better quit this now. And I never thought I would think of myself that way.
Yeah.
And I made a decision to, basically complete the website, learn a ton more. And on Monday, I decided to post it on Facebook and immediately got 20, 30 comments, more likes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Posted to Twitter, shared it on LinkedIn, and decided I'm going to just forget about the whole thing. And people started resharing.
Yeah.
I was saying, they're one of the coworkers I respect a lot, Matt Ianta, said there are great things happening every day. And this is one of the moments that he will always remember. And another guy who's a senior vice president at Mullen now, and he said, he forwarded to his pupils saying, if you want to learn about user experience, listen to this podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really touched.
That's until you interviewed me, then the whole thing went to hell. Everything was fine. I was going like this, and then, yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You were absolutely one of the reasons for me to start the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you. I think looking back, truthfully, when I started this, I know it's a big project. I have a full-time job, but I thought about the people kind of echoing my head. My mom being one, but don't judge me. She's a mom. She's always going to be echoing my head. But I remember very clearly how we met and that image, the aura that you had, and how it projected onto me of making me, I instantly stopped questioning myself as much. I must describe this. You've heard the story multiple times, but that song Fireflies.
Yeah.
When in 2009.
Everybody hated that song except for me. Yeah.
In 2009,
yeah.
Whether I was running on a treadmill or walking down the street, that song totally caught me.
Yeah.
The lyrics made no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
It was bubbly. It's,
it was everything a pop song. It was total sugar.
Total sugar.
Yeah. I liked it.
I had my noise cancellation headphone on, and when I was listening to the song, of course, no coworker near me at Sapient could even hear it.
Yeah.
I was so embarrassed. I was like, let me turn the volume down. And then I would try to pop open Pandora's, minimize it right away, so people don't see it. And then I remember that day, I heard you playing from 30 feet away.
Yeah.
So loud.
Yeah.
And I walked up to you, and you were like, Faye, isn't this great? This is great. And I realized that for some reason, there's so many feelings that kind of, such a simple event, but somehow it really changed my perspective working in a consulting and advertising firm. And the fact that, Sapient hired someone like you.
Oh, that's incredibly nice of you to say.
Yeah, little things.
Yeah. Well, I think it takes a lot. I think it takes a lot to. I think when you're older, when you're a dad and you're supposed to be wearing, dad jeans and doing dad things, you can do almost any embarrassing thing you want. And it's when you begin to admit that you really, every once in a while, you watch things on TV. People are like into these sort of avant-garde. I went to see Nosferatu in the original black and white. It was awesome. And you're like, you know what? I'm not interested. I saw Pacific Rim, the horrible, horrible sci-fi movie, and I loved it. I mean, I didn't love it as a movie. It's not high art, but I admitted that it was a good couple of hours I spent with my son watching an action flick. So I think that there's a certain point where you just got to be honest with yourself and everybody else. So I like the song, but as everybody told, as soon as you like the song, then you played it 500 times, and you're like, okay, I'm done with that.
Yeah.
So I've been looking for the next one since then. Looking for the next big one.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And I think immediately, I remember what happened immediately after we listened to the song together for 30 seconds. Yeah. I approached you for a good reason. Was one of, let's just say, a pretty high-end client executive at the time was not good about collection. I remember their invoices he was supposed to collect for a bunch of clients. Yeah. He ignored me and didn't do it. Yeah. So I approached you and said, what can I do about this? Matt, can you help me?
Did I say slash his tires or something? What did I say? What did I say?
I said, Matt, could you help me with some Photoshop so we could put like a devil, like the horns or something, just make fun of this guy. And I sent an email out to everybody. Yeah. It was kind of the theme. And you said, you know what, Faye, I am 5 minutes late to an agency meeting, but let's just do that right now. And we did that.
Did we?
5 minutes, so we were 10 minutes late altogether. And the best part was we were able to collect over $1 million from this particular client in the next 2 days.
Yeah, I hate to think of what we did, but what's funny is I think I'm losing my mind because I forget all these things. I do remember the song though. That was awesome. That was fun.
Yeah, if I may recall the third thing, we'll get into. I love for you to paint a sort of what your day is like. I think many people are really curious. But before we get there, there's one moment, a third moment I'll never forget. So one being fireflies. Second was painting a picture of this guy in
Putting
Photoshop.
horns on the guy in Photoshop.
Yeah, in Photoshop. There are many other moments I hate to admit, but the third one, I thought it was so magical. We're in a meeting again, once a week. I think we were there to talk about collection, overall strategy, all client executives, and I'm not going to name the person, but someone who's always happy, smiling, everything's always under control. Yeah. And I remember that day, 15, 20 people, and all of a sudden he got really angry, probably for a good reason, because that's once a week meeting, and one of the client executives was not able to join. Yeah. I remember there was a really awkward silence, and you're sitting next to me, and I had no idea how to continue. I had a stack of paper of things I need to go through. Yeah. And I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden, I just saw in the corner of my eyes, you're ready to say something. And I was thinking, oh my God, what's gonna happen? And you cracked the joke. You actually cracked the joke right then and there, and everybody laughed, and we just moved on.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that's good.
You're glad about the outcome.
Yeah, so I was waiting for the rest of the story. I was like, and then you farted. And I was like waiting for you to say there was this really bad thing that happened.
That was amazing, and I was thinking that's risk taking. Yeah. Not to start painting a theme, but I'm taking a risk having a podcast. Yeah. You were taking a risk of telling a joke, and I thought to myself, thank God it's a good one. I mean, that's something that you could be fired from. Yeah, I was, that's...
But you can't be afraid. The thing about it is if you live, and I think this, again, goes back to art, the important thing, the reason you get hired to run a drill press is because you're good at a drill press. And that's a real job. I mean, people do their whole lives, they do a drill press, not to take anything away from it. The reason you're hired in advertising, you're good in advertising because you have an opinion. And to abandon that opinion, you can compromise that opinion. I mean, you can compromise because they don't want to. You're not putting another chimpanzee in another TV spot, for the holidays. It's just not happening. And you thought it was the best idea ever. But to have an opinion, to have a reason, a point of view is what makes people successful. And I think when people get that, all of a sudden they move ahead. Like you're moving ahead in your career to a certain point, and then you realize if you put your opinion out there, it doesn't mean the first agency will like it, even the second agency, but the third agency, like, oh my God, this is great. Tell us what you think. And you're like, you know what? I think this. And then someone listens. It's like you got 74, shares on your podcast. You're like, wait a minute. There's affirmation right there. So in a social world, it works both ways too. My daughter had a party here. This is oversharing, but Addie had a party here. She invited, I told her she could have 50 friends. So she had 50 friends, and we had a DJ, and the lights were down. They were kicking stuff around. People were taking pictures. Halfway through the party, she was in tears. And I asked her what was wrong. And she said what happened was the people she didn't invite saw it on Facebook or someplace because other people were posting pictures and were saying nasty things because they weren't invited. So imagine the middle of a party. We're an hour into a party, and all of a sudden she's getting feedback in real time from people who did not get invited because they were angry. And I thought, if you live your life like that, or if all this stuff impacts you that way, you're never going to get out there. And all we admire is people who get out there. All the people we like, everybody likes. So like that, those people are out there. You're like, that's really cool because they're out on a limb. It's not a comfortable place to live until, like I said, until you're older, and you're over 50 and you don't give a shit anymore. I mean, but when I was it was super important when I was 25 or 35 that I was cool. I had to be, I want to be cool. I want to be in. And then at some point that fades and you get included because you're kind of out. You kind of just wander out into the ether and you sort of like, I like Firefly. You're like, that is the dumbest song I've ever heard. I'm like, no, I like that song.
Let's talk about that for a second. At what point, what age, if you still remember, that was the tipping point where it triggered, something triggered? Was it just a gradual over time?
I think it was not an overnight change. I mean, there's so many weights and measures on a career, on being a father, on being a husband, on being a human being on the planet, but once you put all of that on your plate, once you spread it all out, you're like, okay, I can only do so much. So Warren Buffett had this expression. He said, take the top 25 things you want to do and write them all down, because if you don't vision it, you can't, if you don't write it down, it can't become real. Write those down, circle the top 5, then throw away the other 15. Just throw them away because there's no point in trying to do everything. So what can you do? And then what you can do is be the best you can be at all the different things that you do. So I'm never going to be the best employee that an agency ever had. Yeah, I'm not employee of the month. I mean, I may hit a month. I could peak in December, but I'm not going to be the guy. I'm not there all weekend. I don't do it, and I openly admit I don't do it. I mean, I do when it's necessary, but I'm not going to do it just to do it. And I'm not, I consider myself a really good dad, but I'm not there are dads out there who are like, building paper mache elephants with their kids all weekend. I'm not that guy either. So how much can I do? So it is moderation in all these things, and also the sort of, help ever, hurt never kind of thing, which is like, try to be helpful. But I think to answer your question, along the way, you discover all these things and you try to be super cool and it's just exhausting. You try to be super dad and it's just exhausting. What can I do? You know what? I can be about 90%, 85% in 4 things. That's it then. It's good. I'll take it.
Yeah. I think that's important. The wheel of life, you slice into different pies, personal, career, all that. I think it's important to score relatively high or find a balance around all the pieces. Yeah. I totally agree. I think some people over-index in a certain category and the rest completely suffer. And
that's fear. I mean, I think that's fear. I think what you're describing is if I over-index at work, it's very, you begin to sacrifice other things. It's just very hard. A friend of mine who is a shrink, we're sitting in I walk past Pete's Coffee. It's a great moment. I walk past Pete's Coffee. I see him sitting in the window. So I go in and I sit next to him. He does not say a word. He looks at me and he nods, and I nod at him and I have coffee. And we don't say a word to each other for like 5 minutes. It's just sort of coexistence. And then he looks out the window and he's looking at these cars going by and he goes, do you have any idea how hard it is just to keep a car on the road? And what he was talking about was the fact that, it's amazing we handle what we do. And we all take it for granted. I got, pick up the kids at 3, do this, got the hockey, get to do this, and get the thing, and I got the thing, and I got the, and it's just normal. It's not normal. It's not okay. You got to have some balance in all that. So I think that he's, as a shrink, this is what he deals with all day, is people just get overloaded.
I had that feeling exactly as you described on my way to your house. I, of course, leverage enabled, what do you call that, like GPS, punched in your address, and that's at 25 minutes. So the whole time, I was thinking it was pretty bad. I was like, I don't want to miss any turn. I want to go through the perfect path and get there exactly 25 minutes. And if it's get there 30, it means I made some mistakes. And as I was thinking about that, I was like, wait a minute, life shouldn't be perfect. Life is never perfect. Give yourself, I think we are so hard on ourselves. And one of the things I don't use Twitter very much, but one of the things I tweeted was be gentle on yourself. Be gentle to yourself. And I noticed this in particular, not to get really deep into it. And I think after my dad passed, my mom, I felt like she's on her own. So I make sure I carve out 2-3 days a week, take her grocery shopping, do all this for her, make sure life is as perfect as it can be for her. And there was this period of time I completely neglected myself, my feelings, things I do that are important to me to take care of myself. So I think you're right. And I think you provided almost like a philosophical approach to understand why that is, because even if you plan your day perfectly, your week, forget it. Like your day could totally go sideways and at work.
Well, part of that's cultural, though. I look at you, though. It's the stories that you've told me about. Going from Beijing to arriving at Freiburg Academy at 8:00 at night with the snow falling, and then doing the martial arts as much as you have, and your mom's doing. I mean, if you look at you, I mean, you're at my house doing Feisworld. You know what I mean? Like, you do a lot. You do a ton. And I think that as human beings on the planet, we don't look at each other and recognize the fact that you're doing a ton. No one, I look at my kids and say that, and I cancel things all the time for them. And he's got, 9,000 things, and Sam sleeps most of the day. But the idea is that if I look at you, I'm like, you do this and this and this and this and this. And I said to the kids, I'm like, Faye's coming, and you come walking in the door, and the kids have cornered you to talk about, the China trip. And and you got a lot going on, but people very rarely look at each other unless they're a parent and go, listen, you got to take care of yourself. You got to, you got to take some of this off your plate. But then you realize there's things like, and I think like this for you could be sort of a journey. And that journey helps you, those other things, it lubricates the other things and puts those in perspective. And in that case, that journey becomes super important. So it may be one extra thing, but it also might be the thing that puts everything else in the perspective that it needs to be in. You're like, I have now found my purpose, or I found another purpose in my life, and then the two roads diverge, and off you go. Yeah.
Thank you for your support, though. I know you are one of the busiest people I know, but I just want to throw it out there. After I emailed you, you reply, love it, definitely will get involved. And that means a lot to me. And, for one, you're very known. Your name is very known in the agency world. And that was not the only reason, actually that's the less important of a reason. But the fact that every time I talk to you, you pour your heart out, I remember every conversation, me as a 25, 26-year-old, I thought to myself, why would an EVP care about my feelings, my questions? And you did. So I realized we oftentimes live our lives with false assumptions, with misconceptions. And as I was writing some of the questions, which I didn't even have to look at my paper, the conversation kind of just flows right through. Working at a bigger agency, such as Arnold or Sapient, you get to meet so many people, learn from most of them. But sometimes, regardless of when I was 25, 30 now, and you feel like you're in this very exciting city, very trafficky, and having people like you and also Caleb Brown from episode 1, you guys are very different, but it makes me feel like it's a little neat coffee shop, a little tea house that I could go to and learn things and feel very comfortable and creates a set of opportunities, not just there sipping tea, but really to pull myself away from the chaos and to really look into myself. And this is not just about me, because I've heard all these stories about you. I'm not going to name some of them, but they were so touching. When I entered into my second agency, I spoke with someone who said he was also a very junior designer at the time.
Did I fire him or something?
No, not. And he was a junior designer, and he had to leave the country due to visa issues.
Oh, yeah.
And then he said before, things had to happen very quickly, and I completely understand that, knowing that's similar to my background. And you pull him aside and took care of everything for him without even telling him that you're going to do so. And you actually, set some time aside and make sure his transition was very smooth. And he told me now probably in his mid to late 30s, and he said he will always remember that.
Yeah, I think we got him back. Didn't we get him back?
Yeah, you did. So that concluded part 1 of my conversation with Matt Lindley. In part 2, I started with the question, how should digital versus traditional media merge and/or build upon one another? What is Matt's vision and hope as he has seen the advertising world for decades? Matt said he likes the expression of floating behind yourself. At that moment, you begin to see the world differently. The collective we, as a company, if we could just learn from each other enough to move forward, we can really do extraordinary things. The question is, can you step back far enough to see? Can you be a catalyst for that? We move beyond just company culture. At times, Matt naturally turned himself into an interviewer to ask about my upbringing. And that really connected the dots for me to understand how and why I started this podcast. To listen to more episodes of the Feisworld podcast, please subscribe on iTunes or visit feisworld.com. That is FEISWORLD, where you can find show notes, links, other tools, and resources. You can also follow me on Twitter at Feisworld. Until next time, thanks for listening.